One of my favourite things about the Suikoden series is the amount of minigames that are available in each game. Activities which give us a chance to kick back, relax, and have some fun, or even just to unwind away from the depth of the stories to give us some time to process what's happened. There are over 30 minigames across all 5 main games in the series. Some of them are amazing, some of them suck, and some of them are okay. Everyone's opinions on these minigames are going to be very different, with the exception of the cook-offs and Chinchurorin, which I fully expect many people to rank at or near the very top of their lists. My top 5 and bottom 5 are pretty much set in stone, but my opinions on many of the rest can often change with time as my interest and tastes evolve. My list today is widely different from what it would have been years ago, and my list then would have been very different from when I originally played the games. I have lost track of how many times I have played these minigames, and I have sunk countless hours into them over the years during my many playthroughs. But as a quick refresher for this video and to record some footage for this video, I went back and spent around 10 to 15 minutes or so with each of the minigames. That's 34 minigames, technically 36. Chinchurorin appears in 3 different games, but it's the exact same in each game, so I'm only counting it once. There are 3 versions of checkers in Suikoden 5, but each version of it plays very differently, so I'm ranking them individually. There are also 3 variations of heads or tails, but all 3 also play very differently. There's also 3 different variations of the fishing minigame. So that's 34 minigames, spending about 10 to 15 minutes with each minigame. That's around 6 hours of non-stop playing minigames to refresh my memory for this video. But for my top few choices, I actually got carried away while playing them and ended up playing them for around an hour or so each. This is going to be a long one as there are quite a lot of minigames to go through. I probably could have divided this up into 5 different videos and covered one game per video, but where's the fun in that? So let's not waste any more time and rank the Suikoden minigames from worst to best. Number 34. Mice Catching from Suikoden 4. Starting off on a negative tone and in my opinion the absolute worst minigame in the entire series, Suikoden 4's Mice Catching. This minigame can rot in hell. I hated it the first time I played it and I still hate it now. In fact, my hatred of this minigame has only grown with time, because in typical Suikoden 4 fashion, a lot of good rewards are locked behind tedious and unfun tasks. Treasure maps, old books, window sets, and ship decorations are all prizes locked behind this minigame. Are you a lore enthusiast and you want that old book to discover more lore about the world you love? Are you a decorator and you want those ship decorations? Are you a loot hoarder and you want to find every bit of treasure you can? Do you want to check out the new window set to see how it alters the UI? Well, then you're forced to play through this living nightmare of a minigame. Everything about it sucks. You run around catching mice, but when you catch a mouse you have to run up to the cage and drop the mouse into the cage. But when you're dropping the mouse into the cage, you can miss the cage and then the mouse will run off and you have to chase it around again and recapture it. And while you're running around chasing a mouse, the other mice will run up to the cage and nibble and gnaw on the bars to free any mice that you have already captured. And of course, the floor is slippery, making you slip and slide everywhere as if you're running on ice. And if you slip and slide into something while you're carrying a mouse you captured, well, you'll drop the mouse and it'll escape. I hate everything about this minigame. Number 33. Kabu from Suikoden 3. This is easily the worst minigame in Suikoden 3. No matter how many times I play Kabu, I have never once had fun playing it. It's blackjack at its core, but instead of being a game of 21, it's a game of 9. You know, blackjack is fun, so Kabu sounds fun on paper, right? Wrong. I don't know how it's possible to ruin blackjack, but they've certainly accomplished it here. Kabu has some really annoying rules. You draw a minimum of 2 cards, and you're only allowed a maximum of 3 cards. If you go over 9, your score starts over. If your first card is an 8 or a 9 and you think you've got a good score, you're still forced to draw a second card, starting your score over. To compensate for the lower score value of 9, they've removed jacks, queens and kings from the deck, but for some reason 10s are still in the deck. But what really throws me off are the special combinations that auto-win the game. Combinations which break the core rules of the base game. The dealer, meaning the AI, can get a special combo of an ace and a 9, which automatically wins them the game. I don't understand how because the combo goes over 9, so surely you should start again from the value of the ace, which is a 1. Then there's a player-specific combo of an ace and a 4, which is only a 5, but for some reason that wins you double what you bet, even if your opponent scores a kabu, which is a 9. Or you can draw consecutive cards like a 4-5-6 or a 6-7-8, but they have to be consecutive and in numerical order. And then there are other rules like drawing triple aces or 3 of a kind of certain numbers which can win you up to 5 times your bet. There's a whole bunch of card combos that break the core rule set of the game and I don't like it. What's the point of setting the limit at 9 when there are so many silly ways to allow you to win that break the base aim of the game? I've never had fun playing Kabu and I never will. I disliked it since the very first time I played it and I still dislike it now. I wish they just went with a classic game of blackjack instead. Number 32. Tops from Suikoden 4. Eiyuden Chronicle fans might better know this minigame as Beigoma. Beyblade, essentially. You each get 3 tops, you drop one into the ring at a time and both of your pieces spin and you try to knock the other one down. And that's fine, but you have to twirl the damn analog stick around and around and around and around in circles to manually wind up to spin your next top in. It's Mario Party on the Nintendo 64 all over again. My hand is burning. The actual tops battling minigame itself is fine. You know, tops, Beigoma, whatever you want to call it, the minigame itself is fun. But the near endless twirling of the analog stick genuinely hurts my hand so much that it takes away all of the enjoyment from the game. And once again, in typical Suikoden 4 fashion, there are items locked behind consecutive wins in a tedious minigame. You have to get 5, 10, 15, 20 consecutive wins in one sitting to get the good prizes like window sets, old books, treasure maps and ship decorations. Lose a game and it breaks the streak and you have to start over. Why, Suikoden 4? Why are these prizes always locked behind the worst and least enjoyable minigames you have to offer? If it wasn't from the Nintendo 64 Mario Party levels of pain from the analog stick twirling, I'd actually rank this higher. Number 31. Fishing from Suikoden 4. 3 of the bottom 4 minigames are from Suikoden 4. Things are not looking good for Suikoden 4, are they? I used to absolutely despise fishing minigames in every form and would often even resent games for locking items and equipment rewards behind them. Looking at you, Elder Scrolls Online, for locking the boathouse furnishing behind fishing, and you, Star Ocean Second Story Ore, for locking heaps of good equipment behind fishing. But these days, I'm just completely apathetic towards them in general. I'll shut my brain off and I'll do it while I listen to music or scroll on my phone, but I'll only do it if I absolutely have to get something of great value or something very important. I haven't said anything about the actual fishing in Suikoden 4 itself though, and that's because I just don't care. Next. Number 30. Fishing from Suikoden 2. Suikoden 2's fishing minigame is no exception to my fishing minigame rule. There's nothing of value to be gotten from fishing in Suikoden 2 except for some cooking ingredients, so it's not something that I ever play. For those of you who are interested, you can kind of compete against yourself by trying to break your own records of catching bigger fish, but there's really no purpose to it. Will I play this in the remaster? Maybe just for a few minutes to see how the lake looks. Number 29. Dancing from Suikoden 2. I think you all knew this would be ranked poorly. Never cared about dancing in real life, and I certainly don't care about dancing in video games. The dancing minigame is unlocked by recruiting Karen, and the most exciting part of this minigame is when Karen performs a little striptease by ripping her clothes off to change into her dance outfit. But it's all downhill from there as she drags you on stage to dance with her in a rhythm-style minigame, where you have to memorize her dance moves to the beat of the song. There are 5 different dances to perform, with each dance longer and more difficult to perform than the previous. Rhythm games are not my jam, I don't particularly enjoy them, It doesn't help that this rhythm game is based on dancing, something I have no interest in. Sorry Karen, but I don't care enough about your painting and statue bathhouse decorations to sit through a dance routine. No thank you. Number 28. Heads or Tails from the Sega Saturn version of Suikoden 1. This is the worst version of the 3 different Heads or Tails minigames. In this version there are 3 cups and there's a coin under each of the 3 cups. You have to correctly guess whether the coin under each of the 3 cups is heads or tails. You need to guess 2 correctly to win the game, but guessing all 3 correctly wins you triple what you bet. It's simple and it's a fun concept. Unfortunately, all 3 coins flip simultaneously, and the coins flip so fast that it's impossible to track them, and you can't tell what is under each cup, so you end up guessing all 3 cups at random. Now that said, even though you'll end up guessing at random, I win more than I lose. You know, it's fine, there's nothing really bad about it, but it's definitely the weakest version of Heads or Tails, and it's the worst of the Suikoden 1 minigames. It's the minigame that I've played the least from Suikoden 1, and I don't really feel any desire to ever play it again. Number 27. Treasure Hunt from Suikoden 4. This one is a bit of a cop-out. I don't really consider this to be a proper minigame, but it technically is. You have to find treasure maps and bring them to Renee, who deciphers the map and tells you what island the treasure is on. Then you go to the marked area on those islands in search of the treasure. To find the treasure, you use rods that vibrate and shake as you get closer to where the treasure is buried. Is it the best minigame in the world? No. Do I have anything negative to say about it? No. It's alright. Number 26. Guess the Sum from the Sega Saturn version of Suikoden 1. I have to admit, when I first played the Saturn version of Suikoden 1, I really hated this minigame, but the more time I spent with the game, the more it grew on me. Guess the Sum is quite a simple game, but a difficult game. You guess a number range, then you roll 3 dice and hope that your dice amounts to a number within the range of your guess in order to win. For example, if I guess 16 to 17, I have to roll a 556 or a 566 to win. Or if I guess 9 to 12, I'd have to roll a 333 or a 246 or something. It's a very challenging minigame, and it's probably the weakest dice minigame in Suikoden, but that's not to say that it's a bad minigame, it's just mid. Number 25. Heads or Tails from Suikoden 4. In this version of Heads or Tails, Igor flips a coin and you have to guess whether or not it's heads or tails. If you guess incorrectly, it's game over. Consecutive correct guesses, however, wins you an item prize, up to a maximum of 10 correct guesses. Unfortunately, the prizes aren't exactly anything of note, and most of the prizes suck. The lottery ticket for guessing correctly 5 times is probably the best prize. Everything before that is trash like medicine and antitoxin, and things after 5 are food items, crafting materials and such. But worst of all, the prize for 10 consecutive correct guesses, which is the top prize, is a Thunder Amulet, which you can buy in the shop at your headquarters for around 2000 poch. I don't really know what more I can say. It's heads or tails, there's nothing wrong with it, it's okay, but it's not exactly going to keep you entertained for long. Number 24. Coin Tossing from Suikoden 4. The third and final variation of the Heads or Tails minigames, and definitely the best version of the game. You face off against Igor as you each flip a coin 3 times. The person whose coin lands on heads the most times wins. Although there's a special rule where if you get tails 3 times, you win the game, but only as long as your opponent has at least 1 heads. I don't really know what more to say, it's heads or tails, we've been over this 3 times now, it's fine, it's a fun way to pass a few minutes. Number 23. IK's Arena from the Sega Saturn version of Suikoden 1. In many people's eyes, this is probably the best addition to the Sega Saturn version of Suikoden 1. IK opens up an arena on the roof of Torin Castle where you can battle your way through multiple rounds of combat with monsters to win powerful runes and equipment. For those of you who haven't played it, is it as fun as it looks and sounds? Yeah, it's pretty fun. It can take around 15 to 20 minutes for a single successful run through the arena. And not only is it a great source of powerful runes and equipment, it's also a great source of experience to level up your characters. But as enjoyable as the arena is, my idea of a fun breakaway from playing through the game is not to burn more time doing more basic combat and battles, but rather to play through unrelated side activities like dice and card games, cooking, and so on. While I do enjoy fighting my way through the arena, and I don't have anything negative to say about it, it doesn't really scratch that minigame itch. Number 22, Whack-A-Mole from Suikoden 2. Whack-A-Mole is an arcade classic. I both love and hate this minigame. It's great fun on the first 2 difficulties, but it's an absolute nightmare on the harder 2 difficulties. There's 6 holes, with each hole assigned to a button on the controller. Moles pop up and you press the corresponding button to whack the mole. If you miss 3 moles, you lose the game, and you have to last 60 seconds to win a prize. Doesn't sound so bad so far, right? Well, on beginner and normal, it's a lot of fun, and you'll certainly enjoy it. On hard mode, it can be very challenging as moles pop up and down even faster, giving you less time to react. And you're probably thinking, well, just press the button and whack the mole. Well, you can't, because it curveballs you by throwing in woodchucks mixed in with the moles. And if you hit a woodchuck, you get punished, and it's considered a miss. And remember, 3 misses and you're out. You don't have the time to look at what's coming up before you react, because if you take a split second to look at what it is, you won't be able to react quick enough to whack the mole in time. And to make matters worse, they even made the screen spin around and rotate. It's constantly shifting from left to right, which completely throws you off and makes you forget which button is assigned to which hole. What the hell were they thinking? And on Ultimate? Forget about it. You're only allowed 1 miss, and it's really just a test to see how long you last before you lose. I'd like to blame myself and say that maybe my reflexes aren't the same as when I was a teenager, but I couldn't even beat this minigame on Ultimate as a teenager. Seriously, has anybody ever beaten this? And what's the reward for toughing it out and beating the game? Mole armor set pieces. Show of hands, who even uses that armor set? Do I suck at Whack-A-Mole, or am I right in saying that this is a horrendously implemented minigame on the higher difficulties? It's great fun on the first 2 difficulties and I love playing it, but man does it suck on the higher 2 difficulties. Number 21, Guess the Cup from Suikoden 1. Also known as the Shell Game, there are 3 cups, a coin is placed under the middle cup, then the cups get shuffled around and you have to guess which cup has the coin under it. The higher the bet, the faster the cups shuffle, making it more challenging to track. We all love the pattern trick in Rockland at the beginning of the game. It's a wonderful way to build up some early cash. While the minigame suffers the unfortunate fate of fizzling out of usefulness in terms of making money once you get access to Chinchirorin, it's still a fun game to play every now and again and pass a few minutes. Number 20. Fishing from Suikoden 5. This is the only exception to my fishing minigames rule. I'll give Suikoden 5's fishing minigame credit where credit is due. Rowing around the lake and competing against 3 other characters for the highest score at least puts a twist and a competitive spin on fishing, and it does make it more engaging. It's the best fishing minigame that I've ever played in any game, and it's the only fishing minigame I have ever enjoyed playing. Number 19. Horse Racing from Suikoden 3. It's horse racing. What is there to say really? You race around the track by yourself 3 times and you try to get the shortest combined lap times possible. You can play with no obstacles, some obstacles, or lots of obstacles. The controls are about as straightforward as they come. Hold X to accelerate, let go to slow down, steer left and right with the left analog stick, and you press R1 to jump over obstacles. Simple stuff. There's some pretty decent prizes for completing the races with good times. It's challenging to get the times needed, but it is quite fun. I do think the minigame would have been a lot more fun if you were racing against actual opponents instead of just racing by yourself to beat your own personal score. And unfortunately, it does only have 1 track. But there are some really cool things about it. If you play with Chris, she'll ride around on her own white stallion instead of the Korean horse. If you play with Hugo and Fubar is in your party, you ride on Fubar's back instead of the Korean horse. But Fubar sucks at turning corners because of how big he is, and you need a lot more space to turn. And if you play with Kuroku, He'll run around on the course himself, but because he's so small, he can't jump over the obstacles. It's a really fun game, but it could have been better if you raced against opponents and there was more than one track. Number 18. Mint and Mushroom Cultivation from Suikoden 4. This minigame becomes available after you've recruited both Mao and Nao on the lower decks of your ship. You have to cultivate mushrooms and mints. The whole process of triggering the minigame is incredibly boring, but essentially once you've done it enough times, you'll trigger the Mint and Mushroom War minigame, which is played in the style of the Suikoden 1 war battles. It's basically a game of rock, paper, scissors. Charge beats arrows, arrows beats magic, magic beats charge. And then you have the other option for limited use special abilities, such as increasing the power of your charge attacks, scouting the enemy's next attack, or bribing the enemy to switch sides. If you really love the Suikoden 1 war battles, you'll have an absolute blast doing this. It's a lot of fun and it allows you to have a giant war on a much larger scale than the Suikoden 1 army sizes. This minigame is great fun. Number 17. Checkers from Suikoden 5. This is just your standard game of checkers, but on a smaller scale as it's only played with 6 pieces each. It's my least favourite of the 3 versions of the checkers minigame, and while it might be my least favourite of the 3, it's still at 17th, which is the halfway point, so I'm certainly not saying it's a bad game. It's fairly straightforward, you move diagonally and you jump over your opponent's pieces to remove them from the board. Everyone knows what checkers is, it's pretty fun, what's not to like about it? Number 16. Conqueror from Suikoden 5. Conqueror is a much larger game than the other 2 versions of checkers. Each player has 12 pieces instead of 6. Instead of only being able to move diagonally, your pieces can instead move 1 space in any direction. You can even jump over your own pieces or your opponent's pieces to move further. But jumping over your opponent's piece doesn't remove them from play. Instead, the goal in Conqueror is to move all of your pieces into the spaces your opponent started on. The goal is basically to swap starting positions. The first player to get all of their pieces into their opponent's starting places wins. I think it's a great spin on the checkers game, but the game can drag on for a while towards the end, as both players try to bait their opponent for the final 1 or 2 pieces they need. Number 15. Blackjack from the Sega Saturn version of Suikoden 1. Blackjack is another minigame that was exclusive to the Sega Saturn port of Suikoden 1. What is there to say? What can I say? It's Blackjack, it's a classic. Who doesn't know what Blackjack is? What's not to like? I love it and it's always fun to play. Unfortunately, it is far too easy. In fact, it's so easy that it might even be easier than playing against Gaspar in Chinchurorin. Georges is awful at Blackjack. He might just be the worst card game player of all time. He loses almost every single hand. He's the Gaspar of Blackjack, which does take some of the enjoyment out of it as he doesn't provide much of a challenge, or any challenge at all. My opinion on this minigame changes regularly. I go from loving it to liking it, back to loving it, then back to liking it, but I have never disliked it. I thoroughly enjoy playing Suikoden Blackjack, but George's offering 0 challenge and the ease of the game certainly hurts its overall fun factor. And I have to say, I love the artwork on the cards, and every time I play it, it makes me want a deck of Suikoden team playing cards. You should get on that, Konami, and add a set of Suikoden team playing cards to your store. Number 14. Entrapment from Suikoden 5. This is my favourite version of the checkers minigame. In Entrapment, each player has 6 pieces, but unlike in regular checkers, you don't move diagonally or jump over your opponent's pieces. Instead, you can move forwards, backwards, and sideways in straight lines. The goal is to circle your opponent's pieces with your own, and once you've encircled a piece, that piece is removed from play. It's a nice spin on the game, and despite the small size of the board and the low amount of pieces each player has, there's a decent amount of strategy involved, and the game is always a lot of fun to play. Number 13. Down to 1 from Suikoden 4. This is as simple and straightforward a dice game as they come. Each player takes a turn rolling 1 die into a bowl. If you roll a 1, you win. If you roll any other number, that number is multiplied by 10% of what your base bet was, and you have to pay that amount of potch into the prize pool. So if I bet 100 potch and then I roll anything but a 1, I have to pay that number multiplied by 10. So if I rolled a 2, I'd have to pay 20 potch into the pool. If I bet 2000, which is the maximum amount you're allowed to bet, and then I rolled a 2, I have to pay that number multiplied by 200, which is 400 potch into the pool. Basically, your roll is multiplied by 10% of what your original bet amount was. The game keeps going until one of three things happens. Someone rolls a 1 and wins the game. Someone throws the die out of the bowl and loses the game. Or each player has taken 5 turns and there's still no winner, in which case it's considered a tie and the prize money is divided up evenly between both players. Depending on how you rolled during your turns, you could end up winning or losing some potch from a tie. Despite its simplicity, it's a lot of fun and it's a great way to burn a few minutes here and there, although I do wish the 5-turn limit didn't exist. I'd love to have a game drag on for 20 plus turns and see how big the prize pool could grow. Number 12. Concentration from Suikoden 1. A game that goes by many names. Concentration, memory, matching cards, matchup, whatever you want to call it. The game is played with all cards laid face down and you flip 2 cards at a time to match pairs. In real life, this game can be played casually by yourself or competitively against others, and whoever matches the most pairs wins. But Suikoden puts a spin on it. In Suikoden, not only are you racing against the clock to flip over all cards before the timer runs out, but also when you match a pair, all cards surrounding your pair are auto-flipped over, and any cards that match will also flip over their surrounding cards, creating chain reactions. This creates a very fast-paced game, and depending on your luck, the game can be over within a handful of turns. You can also increase the challenge of the game by placing a higher bet, which will vastly increase the number of cards on the table. I love a good card game, and Concentration offers plenty of fun to pass some time, and isn't that exactly what you want out of a minigame? Number 11. Dragon Horse Race Betting from Suikoden 5. I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't even aware that this was a thing until my 3rd playthrough, because this minigame is only available once you've recruited Haleth, who is almost always going to be one of the last few characters that you recruit at the end of the game. And for many people, he might be the absolute last person they recruit because of how out of the way he is, so I completely missed this minigame on my first 2 playthroughs. As for the minigame itself, it's exactly as the name suggests. You bet on dragon horse races, you place a wager and then you watch the race unfold. There are 4 different types of dragon horses you can bet on. There's the front runner who dashes right out of the gate and burns all of their stamina for an early head start, but it does leave them exhausted and open to be overtaken easily in the latter part of the race. There's the stretch runner, which does the opposite and takes their sweet time at the beginning and conserves their stamina for the final third of the race, where they attempt to overtake everyone by sprinting past them. There's the average runner, who takes a nice steady pace from start to finish. And then you have the inconsistent runner. You have absolutely no idea what this dragon horse is going to do. This dragon horse could be sluggish and lazy and casually stroll the entire race, or it could have a perfect sprint and absolutely destroy everybody. Anything could happen with an inconsistent runner. There are also multiple types of bets you can make too. You can bet on who you think will come first, which, depending on the odds, can win you big money. You can bet on if you think a dragon horse will finish in the top 3, which is generally a very safe bet, but it's not going to make you much money at all. Or you can bet on who you think will finish in first and second. It's a good way to relax, and watching the dragon horse races can be quite fun and addicting, even if you don't care about the potch, which at this point in the game you really shouldn't since you're at the very end of the game. Number 10. The Theatre from Suikoden 3. The theatre is one of the best things about Suikoden 3. The theatre can provide hours of fun, mixing and matching characters in different roles in different plays, casting the perfect characters to watch them put on a masterpiece, or doing what I believe is the real purpose of the theatre, and that is butchering the whole play, ruining the show with the worst casting known to man and creating an unintentional comedy masterpiece. One of my favourite characters to cast is Vicky. She's so airheaded that she forgets all of her lines. She even either forgets that she's in a play or she doesn't understand what a play is, and she's left completely confused and bewildered by what other people are saying and doing. And there are some cool bonus plays you can get. You can get a bonus Necklord play for importing save data from Suikoden 2, and you can get a Suikoden 1 play if you import a save data file from Suikoden 2 which had a save data file from Suikoden 1 loaded into that. The theatre can provide hours and hours of fun, and it's always a blast to sit back and watch what happens. But as fun as enjoyable as Suikoden 3's theatre is, Eiyuden Chronicles theatre minigame blew it out of the water. Not that I'm factoring that into my decision here, I'm just saying, maybe I should rank the Eiyuden minigames next. Number 9. Gopu from Suikoden 3. Suikoden 3's Gopu is one of the most fun card games in the series. It's a 2-player card game. Each player will have one suite, either spades or hearts. It doesn't matter which one you pick. For those that don't know what a suite is, you'll have one of every card of the same type. By that I mean you'll have an ace, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, jack, queen and a king of either hearts or spades, giving you 13 cards. Every turn, a diamond card will be placed in the center of the table. Both you and your opponent will simultaneously play a card from your hand, and you have to pick a card that you think will be a higher value than the card your opponent picks. Whoever picks the higher value card wins the hand. In the event of a tie, the diamond card is put aside and it's carried over into the next round. You might think there's no strategy to it because it's a guessing game, but once you play a card, you can't play that card again. So you need to save your high value cards for moments you think you'll absolutely need them. It always stings when you win a hand by playing a jack, queen or king and your opponent plays an ace, 2 or a 3. You can sacrifice a few hands by playing low value cards when you suspect your opponent will play a high value card and gift your opponent a couple of rounds. Or you could burn your king, queen, jack and 10 on the first 4 rounds to try and win some easy hands. But then your opponent will know that you've used up all of your best cards and they can bait you into playing what little you have left to pick up some easy wins of their own. There's a lot of depth for a guessing game and it's quite addictive. On every playthrough of Suikoden 3 that I've done, I've spent hours playing Gopu, and after recording this, I feel the itch to boot Suikoden 3 back up and go play some more Gopu. Number 8. Dragon Horse Racing from Suikoden 5. Dragon Horse Racing is great fun and surprisingly addicting. You race around the map competing against 5 other racers and there are 3 courses to choose from. There's a simple oval shaped course, there isn't really much of a challenge on this one and it's fairly simple stuff. There's an H-shaped course with lots of sharp corners, this one is much more challenging than the oval shaped course. And then you have the hardest course. This one is by far the most difficult of the 3 courses with lots of twists and turns and lots of very sharp corners. This course is incredibly difficult to win on and it's largely a case of memorizing the corners and timing your turns to perfection. The controls are quite simple. You control your dragon horse with the left analog stick. Your dragon horse will speed up as it runs, but if you bump into anything, it kills all of your momentum and slows you down. You've got a stamina bar you can use to sprint a little faster by pressing X. Your stamina will slowly replenish over time, but you really have to be smart about how and when you dash. And then you can press R1 to help you turn corners more easily. That's all there is to the controls, fairly straightforward stuff. The races can turn around very quickly. You could be in first place and be dominating the race for the first 2 laps, but the whole thing can fall apart on the final lap because if the AI has been smart about their stamina usage, they can surge ahead of you if you haven't managed your stamina correctly. The same is true in the opposite way. There are so many times where I've been in last place for the first 2 laps, even with a somewhat sizable distance between myself and the person in 5th. But because I managed my stamina throughout the race, I was able to dash ahead and steal 1st or 2nd. The majority of the rewards for the minigame aren't really anything special. There's a Guardian Chain armor piece for winning on intermediate and Pale Moon leather armor for winning on the hardest course. Nothing special, but you're not playing this minigame for the rewards, you're playing this one for fun, and Dragon Horse races are a lot of fun. Number 7. Lumberjack Knot from Suikoden 2. Suikoden 2's Lumberjack Knot is more commonly known as the rope climbing minigame. 3 players compete against each other to climb up the cliff and reach the top first. On each turn you can choose to roll the dice or tie a knot. When you roll the dice you move up the number of spaces that you roll, but if you roll a 1, a beautiful, glorious martial arts squirrel will come flying across the screen, bonk you on the head, and then you drop all the way back down to the bottom of the cliff, or to where you tied your most recent knot. The game is incredibly simple, but there's some strategy to it. Do you play it safe and regularly use a turn to tie a knot? Or do you risk it all and tie no knots and bolt for the finishing line? Lumberjack Knot is a lot of fun. My only complaint about this minigame is that quite often the prize for finishing in second and sometimes for finishing in third is better than the prize for finishing in first place, and you have to intentionally lose the game to get the better prize. Prizes like stat boosting stones, bat sets, equipment for unite attacks like the lubricating oil, sexy wink, or the sunglasses. Now, I don't know about you guys, but throwing a game never feels fun to me. Well, okay, that's not entirely true. I once intentionally threw a game in Football Manager as Liverpool so that I could get Everton relegated on the final match of the season. But in general, the competitor in me wants to win, even if the prize sucks. Number 6. Chinchirorin from Suikoden 1, 2, and 4. When you think of minigames in Suikoden, Chinchirorin is going to be the first one that comes to mind for most people. It's the most iconic minigame in the series, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best minigame in the series. For those that don't know, Chinchirorin is a dice game played by 2 people. The rules of the game are quite simple. Each player gets 3 turns rolling 3 dice into a bowl, or until they make a score. If you roll 2 dice of the same number, the number on your third die will be your score. If you get a special roll like a 4, 5, 6 or 3 of a kind, you win double or triple your bet. But if you roll a 1, 2, 3 or a 1, 1, 1, you can lose double or triple your bet. And if you throw a die out of the bowl, you lose the round. If both players get no score or the same score, it's a draw. Although there is one minor difference about Chinchirorin in Suikoden 4, and that is if you roll triple ones you win 5 times your bet, while rolling 3 ones in Suikoden 1 and 2 would lose you triple your bet. Chinchirorin was a hard one to rank because the difficulty varies drastically in each game, going from being incredibly easy in Suikoden 1 to very difficult in Suikoden 2 to being fairly well balanced in Suikoden 4. If you take away how easily exploitable Chinchirorin is in Suikoden 1, where you can carry over your winnings and max out your money in a few rounds, I don't think as many people would have the same fondness or love for it that they do. Don't get me wrong, it's a very fun minigame. I've ranked it 6th out of 34, so obviously it is a lot of fun. But how often is it talked about when it comes to Suikoden 2 and 4? Almost every single time it's spoken about, it's in regards to Suikoden 1. How often is it played in Suikoden 2 and 4? If you ever watch someone streaming those games, or watch videos of someone's playthroughs of those games, how often do they spend playing Chinchirorin in those 2 games compared to how much they played it in the first game? In Suikoden 1, I go running up to Gaspar to play it every 5 minutes. Not out of love for the minigame itself, but to play it because of how easily abusable it is to finance weapon upgrades and purchasing new equipment for your entire army. And the same is true for the majority of you. In Suikoden 2, I haven't played Chinchirorin in my last several playthroughs outside of the mandatory portions, except for recording footage for this video of course. As for Suikoden 4, even though it's a terrible way of making money, I actually go out of my way to play it for about 30 minutes or so every playthrough, just for the fun of playing it. When the easy victories and potch gains were removed from it in future entries after Suikoden 1, many people didn't play it anywhere near as much as they did in the first game, and some people don't even play it at all. So while it is a fun minigame, I genuinely think a lot of people's love for this minigame comes solely from how exploitable it was in the first game. Now, that all said, it is a great minigame, and I do enjoy playing it, and honestly, I think it's at its best in Suikoden 4, where it's much more balanced in terms of wins and losses, which makes for a more enjoyable and competitive experience. Also, I have 6 dice on my desk beside me, and sometimes when I'm sitting at my computer and I'm bored, I'll pick up the dice and roll them. 3 in each hand, and I'll play Chinchirorin against myself to pass a minute or two. Kinda lame, but I do it. And as I said, this was the minigame I had the most difficulty with trying to rank, and that was because of how different the experience of playing it is in each game. Number 5. 51 from Suikoden 4. Suikoden 4's 51 is easily one of the best minigames in the Suikoden series, but I didn't always love it. It's a game that I absolutely hated at first, but over time it grew on me more and more until eventually it became one of my favourite minigames in the series. The reason I hated it at first is because on the hardest difficulty, the AI isn't just playing smarter, but it feels like the AI is blatantly cheating. And to an extent it does, with Mario Kart levels of rubber banding. Whenever you're in the lead by too big of a margin, the AI will string together the most impossibly lucky combo leading into a multiplier bonus to slingshot into the lead. Not only that, but on hard, it often feels like everything is stacked in the favour of the AI, with the AI getting the perfect hands and always having or drawing the perfect card needed, without fail. But then I realised my problem and what I was doing wrong. I had been treating hard mode the same way I treated the game on easy and normal, and that was by chasing combos of my own and trying to hit the multipliers myself and score big. But when I changed my approach to, instead of chasing points for myself, to intentionally playing defense and focusing largely on blocking the AI and forcing the AI into mistakes, hard mode became much easier, and I went from losing almost every single game to about a 60-40 win rate. I'm sure there's a better approach and a better strategy, but this is what works for me. I think this is one of the most underappreciated minigames in the series. It's one that people never really gave a chance because of how difficult it is, and it's one that I don't think anyone will ever give a chance because no one wants to replay Suikoden 4. But if you put in the time and learn how to play it, 51 is great fun. Number 4. Blind Man's Bluff from Suikoden 5. Blind Man's Bluff is a card game where, you guessed it, is a game of bluffing. Each turn you and your opponent randomly draw a card, but you can't see your own card. You can only see your opponent's card. You need to read your opponent's facial expressions to try and determine the value of your own card, and guess if it's higher than your opponent's card. If you think your card is higher value, raise the stakes and increase the bet. If you think it's lower value, fold. But sometimes your opponent could be bluffing and acting like your high value card is a low value card, or your low value card is a high value card. There's a whole bunch of rules and element cards. I'm not going to get into that or I'll be here forever. There are 3 different opponents you can play against depending on the difficulty: Linfa for easy, Shigure for normal, and Jean for hard. Linfa's expressions are fairly easy to read and she doesn't provide much of a challenge. Shigure is much harder to read and he rarely gives anything away. As for Jean, good luck figuring out Jean's tell. It's next to impossible to read her because your eyes will be looking somewhere else and you're going to lose almost every game. But we don't play against Jean to win Potch. We play against Jean for 2 very big reasons. She's the best money you'll ever lose and I'm already 200k deep just while recording footage for this video. The developers knew exactly what they were doing when they chose Jean as an opponent in this minigame, and her dialogue even reflects that, how she's constantly teasing you for not paying attention. But in all seriousness, Blind Man's Bluff is great fun and I always have a good time playing it. Number 3. Fateass from Suikoden 5. Suikoden 5's Fateass minigame is one of the best and most addictive minigames in the series. Fateass is a tile-based game where you have to match up character pairs to get points. Each turn you connect 2 tiles to match a character pair. Pairs are worth 20 points, but special character tiles like Arstadt, Ferret and Limslea are worth 100 points. You can only match tiles if the line between them is 2 angles or less, like a straight line or an L shape. There are special rune tiles on the table. While matching a set of runes provides no points by itself, depending on the tiles around them, you can string together a big chain reaction combo and score big. The game is far too easy on easy and intermediate. You have to play this on the hardest difficulty as it significantly increases the number of tiles on the table. Playing on hard also puts each player on a 15-second time limit per turn, ensuring a very fast-paced and competitive match. Having such a massive increase in tiles also increases the possibilities of dangerous rune combos for both you and your opponent to potentially jump ahead by hundreds of points. This is the type of minigame that I can sit down and easily burn an hour or more playing every single time I boot up Suikoden 5, and I'll often spend several hours playing Fate-Ass on each playthrough of Suikoden 5. It's simple, it's addicting, and it's great fun. Number 2. Cook-Offs from Suikoden 2. Suikoden 2's cook-offs might just be most people's number one pick for their favourite Suikoden minigame. I could even see it being in most people's top 3 JRPG minigames. When you recruit Hayo into your army, he opens up a kitchen in your castle which starts a chain of cook-off battles where he faces off against rival chefs in a goofy storyline. 4 judges are selected at random for each cook-off from among the characters that you've recruited. You then have to prepare an appetizer, main course and dessert for them as you compete against a rival chef for the highest score. With all Stars of Destiny capable of being chosen as judges, and with every character having their own likes and dislikes, combined with the number of recipes available to be cooked, it ensures that almost every judging panel and every cook-off is unique. This offers the cook-offs near endless replayability. Not to mention that the music is an absolute banger and the cooking animations are always fun to watch. I think the biggest complaint we all have about the cook-offs, in fact my only complaint about the cook-offs, is that there was no free battle mode to allow you to enjoy casual cook-offs at your own leisure. If Konami ever makes Suikoden 6, I hope the cooking minigame returns in some fashion, as this is one of the greatest minigames of all time. And finally, number 1, Read Upon from Suikoden 4. This might be a very controversial pick, but Read Upon is not only my favourite minigame in Suikoden, but I'd put it near the top of the best minigames of all time. I have often, and still do, boot up Suikoden 4 for the sole purpose of playing Read Upon. It's one of the most addicting minigames of all time. I love everything about it. I've loved it since the first time I've played it, and I still love it now. I could sit here for hours playing Read Upon and not get tired of it. And in all honesty, I think I have spent just as much time playing Read Upon as I have playing through the story of Suikoden 4 itself, and I've done around 10 playthroughs of Suikoden 4. It's also the minigame that I have the biggest love-hate relationship with in Suikoden. I have lost track of the amount of times that I've lost on the first turn. I have never, in all my time playing Read Upon, gotten such an outrageously good starting hand at the beginning and won the game within the first 2 turns. Yet Rita has done it to me countless times, and I keep coming back for more punishment because it's just that damn fun. I've been yapping and I haven't even told you what it is, but you can tell by looking at it, Read Upon is a tile-based game where the goal is to create 3 sets to win a round. There are 41 tiles, each player is dealt 8 tiles to start with, then 24 tiles are placed face down in the centre and each player draws 1 tile per turn. But you're only allowed to hold 8 tiles, so every turn you must discard 1 tile. The final tile is unused. The unused tile is called a Dora, which provides a bonus score to whoever wins the round. Then there are 5 element tiles. The 5 element tiles that can be drawn and played have special functions. You can either hold onto them and try to create a set of 3, or you can use them. The lightning rune allows you to draw 3 tiles instead of the usual 1. The fire rune destroys 1 tile from your opponent's hand. The wind rune flips over a random amount of your opponent's tiles, showing you what they have while hiding them from your opponent for the remainder of the round. The earth rune grants you one-time protection against your opponent's use of a fire or wind rune, but it can't be applied retroactively to a wind rune. While the water rune allows you to draw 1 tile from the discard pile. Then there are a whole bunch of special rules which I won't get into, otherwise I'll be here forever talking about the game. But one other thing I do love about Read Upon is that you can customize the tiles before playing by changing the characters' pictures on the tiles. Characters that you've recruited become available to be added to the tiles, and each character has their own value depending on if you place them as a 1, 2 or a 3. Essentially, you can create extremely high value sets with specific characters on the tiles, or you can create very low value sets, and that adds a whole other layer of strategy to the game, as you could try to force your opponent to build low value sets while you aim for the higher value sets. I love Read Upon. I never get tired of playing it, and I could honestly sit here and play it for hours. Besides, listening to that music, it's just so happy and cheerful, it puts me in a good mood. So there you have it, my rankings for the Suikoden minigames. Who would have thought after the rocky start that Suikoden 4's minigames got off to, that 2 of the top 5 would be from Suikoden 4? Let me know what you think of my list. Do you agree or disagree with my choices? What would you change about my list? How would you rank the minigames? What are your favourites and least favourites? Have you completed the Whack-A-Mole minigame on Ultimate? Because I never have. I know I left out Suikoden 4's net fishing minigame, but is that really a minigame? All you do is talk to Shiramine, cast a net, leave, and come back sometime later and see if it caught any items. It's not something you actually play like the pole fishing minigame, it's just something that passively happens without you even being around, so it's not something that I consider to be a minigame. I think Suikoden 5 actually has the best selection of minigames overall. All of them are either great or good. I enjoy playing all of them, and there's not a single minigame in Suikoden 5 that I dislike. As for which game has the worst minigames, that's a tough one. Suikoden 1 is tricky because while it has 7 minigames, they're split between 2 different versions of the same game, with 4 of them being exclusive to the Japan-only Sega Saturn version, and the vast majority of people have not played the Saturn version of the game. So even if we ignore the Saturn version and only judge Suikoden 1's minigames based on the PlayStation version, the Suikoden 1 minigames are fairly enjoyable, but let's be honest, they're middle of the pack. Suikoden 2 has some incredibly fun minigames with the cook-offs and lumberjack knot, but it also has some real stinkers in fishing and dancing. And then it has some mid-tier minigames that I'm torn on. Chinchurorin is incredibly difficult in Suikoden 2, but it's still Chinchurorin, and at its core it's still fun. It's just nowhere near as fun as it is in Suikoden 1 and 4. And Whack-A-Mole, while impossible and completely unfun on the harder difficulties, is a lot of fun on lower difficulties. Then we have Suikoden 3. It's got 2 great minigames in the theater and Gopu, 1 fun minigame in horse racing, and then it has the biggest steaming pile of dung in Kabu. While Suikoden 4, despite having a lot of trash minigames and a lot of okay minigames, it also has some of the best minigames in the series in Read Upon and 51, while also having the best version of Chinchurorin. I suppose Suikoden 4 overall does have the highest volume of bad to mid minigames, but is that made up for by having some of my favourites? I don't know. Anyway, this video has dragged on long enough. Let me know your thoughts and your list below. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.